There's a place, he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Matthew. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. Well, from this time when Jesus is giving this speech, he's about to die, and about a day later, he will die on a cross and he will be cut off. Okay, so now if you do all your math and you have your 7 weeks and then you have your 62 weeks, right? You add all those up and you have 69 weeks. But it says there's 70 weeks determined for his people. So the Jews, they have 1 week left. So there's 1 week left for Daniel's people. And so this week that's determined for the Jews, it's this last 7-year period, but that's also the time that we call the time of Jacob's trouble. And that's what it's called in Jeremiah 30. And it's the same thing that we call the 7 years of tribulation in the book of Revelation. But this 7-year period, it's not chronological like with the other 69 weeks. But this week comes after the age of the Gentiles. Because right now, when Jesus dies, the whole focus will go to the church because he's going to build his church. But then after he takes his church away, it goes all back to Israel. And all the thinking goes back because of all these promises that God had made Abraham to his descendants, to the Jews. Now, when you talk to a Jew today and you say, well, and you know Jews, they don't believe Jesus is their Messiah. And you say, well, how will you know your Messiah? And the answer that they most likely will give you, they'll say, well, we'll know the Messiah because he's the one that's going to allow us to rebuild our temple. Okay, so now let me read to you just a little bit out of Daniel 9, just verses 26 and 27. And it says, and after 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end of it shall be with a flood until the end of the war. Desolations are determined. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to the sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abomination shall be the one who makes desolate, even until the consumption, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate. All right. So what this is saying here, who that prince is, he's calling him a prince, but what he's talking about is the Antichrist, and that he is going to make this treaty with Israel. He makes this deal with Israel to be able to rebuild their temple. But in the middle of the week, like it mentions here, so this means 3.5 years into this of having their temple back, well, the Antichrist is going to set up this abomination of desolation, which means he's going to set up this image of himself, which is in Revelations, we're told it's a living statue, and he's going to set that right up in the holy place of the temple. And then he's going to tell Israel to worship him as God. And all of this lines up with Revelations 13, 14, and 15. Okay, so when this happens and the Antichrist, he sets up his image in the holy place, that's when the Jews are going to know that they've been deceived and they've been fooled. And so that's what this is. This is what Jesus is giving them here is the instructions for what to do when this happens. And so this is a completely different sign than the Jews being told to flee back in Luke 21:20 at the destruction of the temple. Because there, the sign for the destruction of the temple was that there's going to be armies surrounding Jerusalem. Here, there are no armies surrounding Jerusalem, but here it's going to be this abomination of desolation.
But some people get that confused, and they'll try to say that those are the same events. And those people actually believe that Jesus returned in 70 AD. And even though 70 AD was really bad, it's not what Jesus describes here. Because here it says, "For then there will be a great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time." Okay, because the last 3.5 years here after them and when they flee, this is where God pours out his judgments on the earth. And you can read of all those plagues in the book of Revelation. That's like when all the locusts come out, the crazy locusts, and things fall into the water and kill everything. And then God, in his mercy, and in verse 32, he says, "And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened." All right, so the word elect here, a lot of times you hear the word elect that's described in the church, but it's not being used for the church here. Elect here means Israel, because the elect, the church, they've already been raptured before this time. So it's the same word that's used in the book of Revelation for Israel, the elect. And so then we see that after this time, that there will still be false prophets and there'll be false Christs, because Jesus warns them not to follow anyone who tells you that here's the Christ. Because it's telling us that even those false Christs will be showing great signs and great wonders. And he says, I'm telling you beforehand, don't follow them, because he doesn't want to lose any of these people who have gone through so much. And you kind of wonder if these guys are going to listen, because this deception that's going to happen to them is going to be great. And so Jesus tells them not to follow anyone who claims that they are the Christ, and not to follow them no matter what they do. Because he knows at the time of this calamity, the people are going to be looking for a savior. But then Jesus goes on, he says, nobody is going to miss him, because he's going to be like lightning in the sky. So this is going to be sudden. And that phrase that he uses saying, the coming of the Son of Man, well, that word there is called the parousia. And that's the only time this word parousia is even used in the gospel. And that means the presence. So the presence of Christ. And that word in Greek is only used for very high-ranking officials. And then Jesus, he gives another signs about the eagles gathering. Okay, and some people, they go, well, that's really kind of hard to understand, and it can be. But I think one way, and a real possible way to look at that, is that eagles, that they're birds of carnage, which means eagles, they eat dead bodies. And so what I believe Jesus may be talking about here is about those Gentile nations that are gathered to fight against Israel and to fight against the Christ in that battle of Armageddon where they're defeated. And that's written in Revelation 13, 16, and 17 also. And this here, the second coming of Christ, because this all comes after Jesus defeats the Gentiles. And that's when there's that national response from Israel. And that's when Israel will receive their Messiah. Okay, now these are the few thoughts that I had about this after I studied all this. There's one thought that keeps coming back to me. And all I think about was that I think with everything that mankind has done and all the evil we've done against God and against people from the beginning of time, and I look at this and I think, God is so merciful, because this wrath that's poured out, the years of the tribulation, it's only 7 years. That's like less than 2 terms of a bad president. And he says here, he cuts it short for the love of his elect. So bottom line, if you look at this world and you look at this passage and you examine everything, I would say that everything's in place. And what we need to do at this point is that we need to be able to encourage each other with these words about Jesus coming back to see us. So we're still in the middle of the Olivet Discourse, where Jesus is talking about his second coming. And what you need to remember from last week is that there are 2 different second comings. And the first one is when Jesus is coming back for his church. And that's what we call the rapture of the church. That's where Jesus, he meets us in the air. And then the second one is when Jesus is coming with his church, and he comes with us and he touches down on the earth. And that's what we call the second coming of Christ. And the first thing we read about today is all these cosmic disturbances when the Son of Man comes in his glory. And so this is the time of the end. And it tells us that this is after the tribulation. So this is after that 7-year period. And these cosmic disturbances are mentioned in other passages, are mentioned in Joel 2:10, Revelation 6:12, and Isaiah 34:4. And no one knows exactly what the sign of the Son of Man is, but it will be something visible, and it will be when Jesus returns, and everyone will see it. And so when I read about this period that's called after the tribulation, and I think about when the sun is darkened, and with the moon not shining its light anymore, and the stars are all falling from heaven, I would love to give you all these neat little answers of all this happens and exactly what it'll be like. But I don't know, because these things have never happened before. And although God has given us a glimpse of these things in this chapter, I don't believe that these things are here to terrify us as born-again believers, but they're here to show us that God, he's in total control of all things. And though everything will change, and even though we won't be able to comprehend it, that God, he understands it, and he is able to coordinate all these things for his elect. And not only for Israel, but for all of his family who's left here on the earth. But I don't believe that for us, for born-again Christians today, that we will see these events just as regular people that are living out our lives here on earth, like the people who made it through the tribulation. And that when we see this day, and when we return with Jesus, we will rule and we will reign and we will be in our glorified bodies. But those who are not Christians, and for those who are left behind, I don't believe most of them will see this day either, because a lot of people are going to die in the tribulation, and they won't make it to the end. But the people here who have made it through the tribulation are the tribulation saints and the Jews who have now received Jesus as their Lord and King. Now, the way that I look at this is I look at this kind of the same way as I look at my own life, as how I'm a father, and I'm the head of a household. And with me and my family, we've moved across country a few times. We've even moved over the ocean. And my children, they would have no idea of what it takes to move across the country. They don't understand about selling homes. They don't understand about mortgages and titles and transfers, or coordinating the moves of household items and getting everybody registered for school and how to figure out your work schedules. And even if I did explain all of this to them, they still wouldn't understand. And so all I tell them is, hey, we're moving. It's going to be great. And so they get a glimpse of what we're doing.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.